Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naistiki Om Ajnantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim Yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining. So we'll resume from 596. And like I said, this is a small chapter with simple verses. So hopefully we'll be able to complete this chapter in today's session. And just to quickly recap, the chapter is talking about the supreme character of Jat Bharat. And essentially it's context setting. It sets the context of the next set of chapters, which is the conversation between Jat Bharat and Maharaj Rahuganath. So verse 66, Sayan Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
The Brahmana's father of Jat Bharat considered his son his heart and soul, and therefore he was very much attached to him. He thought it's wise to educate his son properly, and being absorbed in this unsuccessful endeavor, he tried to teach his son, the rules and regulation of brahmacharya, including the execution of the Vedic vow, cleanliness, study of the Vedas, the regulatory method, service to the spiritual master, and the method of offering a fire sacrifice. He tried his best to teach his son in this way, but all his endeavors failed. In his heart, he hoped that his son would be a learned scholar. But all his attempts were unsuccessful. Like everyone, this Brahmana was attached to his own, and he had forgotten that someday he would die. Death, however, was not forgetful. At the proper time, death appeared and took him away.
So this verse captures the relationship between Jat Bharat and his father, and the endeavor of the father to make Jat Bharat a Brahman as per his definition. And one of the interesting statements is the last statement in the verse that says that one can forget death, but death will not forget you. And that's the harsh reality, that almost all of us forget death, but death will never forget any one of us. So that's what happened to the Brahmana. Even though he was elevated, he had all good qualities, but it is described over here that he was a Brahmana attached to the home, and one of the symptoms of being materially attached is becoming forgetful of one's purpose in life. So death in itself is death is often used as an index to one's spiritual advancement, but factually it is not. In fact, people who are a little bit more spiritually advanced, they just consider death as to be a punctuation from one body to another. But the relevance of death is that one uses their time in the service of the Lord or in making spiritual advancement, because death is the end of now time, of course, continues with the next body, but it is the end of this life. And so it comes along with it some amount of time. That, okay, death is going to give one person 100 years, death is going to give another person 80 years. So that person then has that time. And what that person does out of that time is what is relevant. So what did the father try to teach? So he tried to teach him the chanting of Gayatri. We saw in the previous verse that he was teaching him Gayatri. And Prabhupada, Vishwanath Chakravarti writes that chanting of the Gayatri is a powerful way to make spiritual advancements, right? And this is a point that is substantiated by Srila Prabhupada also. And I was actually reading this document given to me by Narayani Mataji, which glorifies the Gayatri mantra. That in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 35th verse, Krishna, he basically says that I am the Gayatri, I'm the Gayatri mantra. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is noted that the Gayatri mantra is specially meant for God realization because it represents the Supreme Lord. The mantra is meant for spiritually advanced people, and when one attains success in chanting it, he can enter into the transcendental position of the Lord. The Gayatri mantra is very important in Vedic civilization and is considered to be the sound incarnation of Brahman. Then in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada says that Gayante Trayate Yasmad Gayatretva Tata Usmata. That one who chants the Gayatri mantra is gradually delivered from the material clutches. Right? So the Gayatri has the ability to untangle one's material engagement. In the Brahma Samhita, it is described that by the power of the Gopal Gayatri mantra, Lord Brahma was able to create the material universe, which means that Gayatri not only has the power for spiritual emancipation, it will also fulfill one's material desires, because Brahma's had the desire to create. And then he was given the Gopal Gayatri mantra by Krishna, and by chanting or meditating on that, he became empowered to create he got the Gopal Gayatri mantra from Saraswati Devi. And this Saraswati Devi, of course, is the consort of Narsinga Devi. There's a material Saraswati Devi who comes as the consort of Brahma, but this is the spiritual who is the consort of Narsinga Devi. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati comments that the Gayatri mantra has twofold aspect. One aspect is that it can make a pure soul run after Krishna and the gopis. And the second is that if the devotee has any material desires, those desires will also be fulfilled. So in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, we have several Gayatri mantras. So we have the Brahma Gayatri mantra, the Om Bhur-Bhuva Swa, which worships Lord Krishna as one who enthuses the life of his devotees. Then we have the Guru Gayatri mantra, like Om Guru, Klim Guru, and Om Guru Devaya Vishmaye. That essentially is the embodiment of Vishwanath Chakravarti's statement, Sakshat Dharitve Samasta Sastra, and all the scriptures see the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna. Then there is the Gaura Gayatri mantra, which worships Lord Krishna as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the mantra, he is addressed by the name of Vishwambar, the maintainer of the world. Then there is the Gopal Gayatri mantra, famous mantra, and that invokes the three aspects of Madan Mohan, Govind, and Gopinath, right? The clean mantra, which are the presiding deities of Sambandha, Abhidhe, and Prayojan. And then we have the Kam Gayatri mantra, which essentially, that's the last mantra that we chant, which worship Krishna as the origin of Kamdev, as the origin of Cupid. So in the Brahma Samhita, the Gayatri is described as Trimurti Maya, and the mother of the Vedas. Right? So it said, from the Om comes the Gayatri, and from the Gayatri comes the Vedas. So the sound vibration of Krishna's flute is essentially the Gayatri mantra that enters into the ear holes of Brahma. And from that, the whole Vedic knowledge is received. So just like Krishna's name is not different from him, the Gayatri mantra is not different from Krishna also. In 2935, Srila Prabhupada writes that the transcendental devotional service of the Lord is so wonderful that the occupation keeps the deserving devotees always wrapped in psychological activities. This love of God had developed in the heart of the devotee is a great mystery. This means that for a devotee, real liberation means entering into the loving relationship with Krishna. So we must chant Gayatri Mantra with this consciousness, desiring loving service to Krishna. So the Gayatri Mantra helps the disciple develop a higher taste for the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And sometimes we say that what's the relationship? Ultimately, it helps us chant our japa better. And it said that the Kam Gayatri Mantra, it helps us overcome lust, which is the material reflection of the spiritual love. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that those who are highly elevated and who chant the Kam Gayatri will be able to hear Krishna's beautiful flute music as he calls to his most confidential devotees. So these are some of the glories of the Gayatri Mantra. And Prabhupada writes over here that in the purport to the verse 596, he writes that of course, for an ordinary man, the Vedic principles are imperative. Things like chanting the Gayatri. No one can avoid them. But when one has attained the perfection of devotional service, it is not very important to follow Vedic principles. Right? So the fact that Jat Bharat was neglecting the Gayatri does not reflect on the fact that Gayatri is a materialistic mantra or it is ineffective. It is a very elevated mantra, but he was even more elevated. He was at the point where he was so absorbed that he did not need to follow any rules and regulations, chant a prescribed number of rounds, or chant the Gayatri. So this indicates the exalted consciousness of Jat Bharat, which we will see it manifest in his preaching in the next chapter. Okay, verse 7.
Thereafter, the Brahmana's younger wife, after entrusting her twin children, the boy and the girl, to the elder wife, departed for Bhakti-loka, voluntarily dying with her husband.
So this is the practice of sati, where the wife enters into the funeral pyre with the husband, and anusmathaya. Anusmathaya means that anu means by following, and Srila Prabhupada qualifies it with the word voluntarily, because one of the misconceptions is that sati is whether the wife wants it or not, she's forced to enter into the funeral pyre with the husband, but that is completely untrue. The fact is that if the wife so desires, she may enter into the funeral pyre of her husband, And the destination of such chaste woman is Patilok. We see the same thing in Mahabharata. When Maharaj Pandu died, then actually there was a debate going on between Kunti Devi and Madri. Kunti Devi said that I'm the elder wife, so then it's my right to enter the funeral pyre. And Madri said, by right, yes, but circumstantially, it behooves me to enter because Maharaj Pandu was cursed that if he would try to have conjugal relationships with his wife or a woman, he would die. And while he was very much self-controlled, but once he came across, or once he and Madhuri were in an environment that was, very romantic, and Maharaj Pandu became lustful, and then he tried to enjoy with his wife, and as per the curse, he died. So then Madhuri said that he was trying to enjoy with me, and that desire is unfulfilled. So allow me to follow him and fulfill his desire. And she entrusted her two sons, Nakul Sahadev, to Kunti Devi and entered. In the fourth canto, in the 23rd chapter, we also saw when Prithu Maharaj, he when by the power of his devotion and his body burnt gave up his body, and Queen Archie, then she set it on a funeral pyre and then she entered it. And there also it is mentioned, this is verse 29, that Queen Archie also entered Patilok. But there is a difference, and there Prabhupada mentions that the Patilok that Queen Archie went is not in the material universe, because Prithu Maharaj's destination was not in the material world. But then he says, in the material world also, when a woman dies with her husband, she again unifies with him in the next birth. So the understanding is that when the younger wife of the Brahman entered the fire, then she united with him in the next world, which is Patiloka. Just like there's a Pitraloka for the parents, Patilok for where the wives go, for chaste wives go with their husbands. Okay, verse 8.
After the fathers died, the 9 stepbrothers of Jadbharat, who considered Jadbharat dull and brainless, abandoned the father's attempt to give Jadbharat a complete education. The stepbrothers of Jadbharat were learned in the three Vedas, the Rig Veda, Samveda, and Yaturveda, which very much encourage fruitful activity. The 9 brothers were not at all spiritually enlightened in devotional service to the Lord. Consequently, they could not understand the highly exalted position of Jadbharat.
So, in the previous verses, we saw that Jadbharat's father was selflessly trying to teach him so many beneficial things. But Jadbharat appeared to be stone-hearted, that he did not reciprocate to the genuine affection of his father, because he recognized that the affection was material in nature. So he understood that the father's affection for him was because of the relationship that he had on a bodily platform. Otherwise, the father would not have distinguished between his son and those who were not his son. So if his father was committed to teaching him Vedic knowledge, Gayatri, and if the relationship was not on a bodily platform, then he should have been trying to teach it to everybody. But he was focusing only on his sons. And the nature of the teaching was also for one to be elevated to the mode of goodness, which Jadbharat did not want to do so. Now, in the life of practicing devotees like us, we also need to, or we do adopt this principle of Jadbharat. Now, we may not necessarily imitate his behavior, But the principle that he was demonstrating is that if a relationship results in taking one away from one's spiritual endeavor, then one should be careful to distance oneself from the relationship. So, on one hand, one should reciprocate with affection to those that are helping advance in the spiritual life. Second is, one should also reciprocate with affection to those who are not interfering with the spiritual life. So they may not be helping, but they are not interfering with the spiritual life. But one should distance oneself with those that are actually an impediment to the spiritual life, regardless of how intimate that relationship is. For instance, when especially when youth, they take to Krishna consciousness, the parents will, out of affection, say that please give up your spiritual practices because you will be a failure in this world, or whatever. They'll say give up your spiritual practices. So they're coming from a platform of affection, but that is material affection. So such instructions should be rejected. Does not necessarily mean that the person should be rejected. It does not mean the relationship should be rejected, but that instruction should be related. And Jat Bharat demonstrated that he stayed with his father and he continues to stay with his brother, even though they were actually impediments to his spiritual life. But while he was staying with them, he was staying away from their instructions. Now, in Jat Bharat's case, the technique was that he appeared to be mad. And that's how he protected himself. In our case, doesn't mean that we pretend to be mad, but different ways that we can do to protect ourselves. Like we can agree to disagree. We can, I know devotees who will simply not respond. That, when they go back to the family setting, then so one devotee was saying that when he had passed out of engineering college, very good engineering college. He had actually done a job for a while. And then he joined Chapati temple and gave up his job. And he said when he went back to my house, then all the neighbors also came. So it was like a community thing. The neighbors came, and at one level there was a lot of affection. Like he was a star of that neighborhood. He was a gold medalist. He went to one of the best schools. So they were all proud of him. And they were also counseling him in different ways. That do it when you're old. This is not the right time, this and that. And then this devotee was saying that at one point I was overwhelmed with so much of love. But then and he gives credit to his Guru Maharaj, that by the mercy of the Guru Maharaj, I was able to internally distance myself. I was very respectfully listening to what everybody was saying and not committing to anything. He said, I didn't engage in debates. People giving all these kinds that this Veda says this, or Bhagavad Gita says this, their version of Bhagavad Gita says this. He said, I was just quietly listening, not debating with them. But internally, I did not let myself get engaged. And so Jat Bharat is demonstrating how does an aspiring spiritualist live in a materially vested environment. Okay. Verse 9 and 10, long translation.
Degraded men are actually no better than animals. The only difference is that animals have 4 legs and such men has only 2. These 2-legged animalistic men used to call Jat Bharat mad, dull, deaf, and dumb. They mistreated him, and Jat Bharat behaved for them like a madman who was deaf, blind, and dumb. He did not protest or try to convince them that he was not so. If others wanted him to do something, he acted accordingly to their desires. Whatever food he could acquire by begging or by wages, and whatever came out of its own accord, be it a small quantity, palatable, stale, or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification because he was already liberated from the bodily conception, which induce one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. He was full in the transcendental consciousness of devotional service, and therefore he was unaffected by the dualities arising from the bodily conception. Actually, his body was as strong as a bull, and his limbs were very muscular. He did not care for winter or summer, wind or rain, and he never covered his body at any time. He lay on the ground and never smeared oil on his body and took a bath. Because his body was dirty, his spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered, just as the splendor of the valuable gem is covered by dirt. He only wore a dirty loincloth and his sacred thread, which was blackish. Understanding that he was born in a Brahmana family, people would call him a Brahmana Bandhu, a Brahman Bandhu, and other names. Being thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there.
Thank you, Prabhu. So the long translation and a very short purport. So this essentially talks about these three verses, or four verses, 8, 9, 10, and 11. They talk about the mistreatment of Jat Bharat, especially this verses 9 and 10, where Sukadeva Goswami, he criticizes those who criticize Jat Bharat. Right? He said degraded men are actually no better than animals. They are Dvipad Pashu. And how did they react? They reacted by mistreating Jat Bharat. And what did Jat Bharat react? He behaved like a bad man, who was deaf, blind, or dull. He did not protest or try to convince them. Right? So this, again, practical tips. And when the situation is adverse, then no need to protest or convince others. He just stayed aloof. He stayed aloof as much as possible externally, and that was by staying dirty, by appearing like a madman, and he completely stayed aloof internally by being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. He did not go after food, so whatever food came by on its own, he would take that. So externally, he looked degraded. His body was dirty, and just mentioned that those things that are done simply for hygiene, like rubbing oil or taking a bath, he did not do any of it. So the conditioner, if you see the parallel, very similar to Rishabdev. When Rishabdev was in the final stages of his life, he practiced complete virakti. And similar situation, that he was like a madman rolling in his stool and urine, and people would come and pass air on him, or they would throw stones at him, and he reacted by not reacting. He completely stayed aloof. So in the face of material adversity, the recourse is to draw strength internally, as opposed to going after everybody, fighting with them, trying to convince them that actually what I'm doing is the right thing and this is the most elevated platform. He simply focused on his own Krishna consciousness. And the result of it is also given a little bit, that his body was strong as a bull and his limbs very muscular. Right? So even though he hardly got anything to eat, but because of his spiritual potency, he was physically very strong. He didn't care for winter and summer, wind or rain, which means that he had a fair amount of tolerance to it. And did not care. The people called him Brahmabandhu and other names, but he did not care for any of it. Prabhupada writes that Narottam Das Thakur has sung that Dehasmriti nahi ara samasara bandhan kaha tara. That one who has no desire to maintain the body or is not anxious to keep the body in order and who is very satisfied in any condition must be either mad or liberated. Right? And based on the external symptoms, one may be either mad or liberated, but based on the internal symptoms, we understand that Jat Bharat was completely liberated. Okay, next verse 11.
Jat Bharat used to work only for food. His stepbrothers took advantage of this and engaged him in the agricultural field work in exchange for some food. But actually, he did not know how to work very well in the field. He did not know where to spread dirt or where to make the ground level or uneven. His brothers used to give him broken rice, oil cakes, the chaff of rice, worm-eaten grain, and burnt grain that had stuck in the pot. But he gladly accepted all this as if it were nectar. He did not hold any grudge and ate all this very gladly.
So the previous verse spoke about how others treated Jat Bharat, and this verse talked about how Jat Bharat reacted to their treatment. And so in order to maintain his facade of being mad, he basically acted that way. So his brothers would ask him to farm in the field. And he would go there, and where they were supposed to level the ground, he would put mud over there. And where you're supposed to put mud, he would dig a hole over there. They finally basically gave him the job of guarding the field, which they said even an animal can do. So he would basically just sit in the field and supposedly guard it from there. But he was happy. He did not have any resentment towards others, because the resentment is also a sign of material duality. So when it said Jat Bharat worked only for food, it means that minimum sustenance, that just enough to survive. That's all he would concern himself with. He did not care for opulent food. He did not care for large quantities of food. So his brothers would give him, let's say, broken rice or chaff of rice or worm-eaten grains or burnt grain that was stuck in the pot, or oil cakes. But he happily accepted it. Prabhupada writes that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that in the material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. One has to understand that in the material world of duality, to think that this is good or that is bad is merely a mental concoction. However, one should not imitate this consciousness. One should actually be situated on the spiritual platform of neutrality. So Prabhupada keeps giving us this cautionary note also, that just like Maharaj Arahat, he emulated the symptoms of Rishabdev and came up with a deviant religion. Prabhupada is cautioning that one should not emulate the symptoms of Jat Bharat. One should not say, okay, now I will act I'll act like a fool. I forget where this conversation happened. Either it was, maybe it was with the disciple of the Srila Prabhupada, one of the other disciples, but the disciple once made some mistake. And the spiritual master chastised him that what kind of nonsense are you doing? So the disciple in his defense said that, well, it's said in the scriptures that the disciple should act like a fool in front of the Guru Maharaj. So then the Guru Maharaj said that you don't have to act, you actually are a fool. No need for you to pretend to be a fool. So we don't have to artificially pretend to be like Jat Bharat, right? We don't have to say that we are aloof from material dualities and we act like a madman. Prabhupada gives the core instruction, right? That one should not imitate this consciousness. One should actually be situated on the spiritual platform of neutrality, right? One should not externally act like that. One should try to develop that mentality internally. And as we absorb ourselves in that mentality, it's a process. So as we absorb ourselves in that mentality, then we will see that indifference manifesting more and more. In fact, the indifference to duality is one of the earliest symptoms of spiritual advancement. Like it is said that Nam, Roop, Guna, Leela, right? From the name, the qualities, the form, and the pastimes emerge. But that is very advanced. Even though they say that from the name, Nam, Roop, Guna, Leela, but that is very advanced. At our stage, it's not going to. Even if it's advanced, it will come in, and it will come as promos, as like in 30-second YouTube videos, that advertisements that come when you're trying to watch a lecture, it will come like that. But what will actually come that we can relate to, that will actually sustain, is indifference to duality. And that's the first benediction that the spiritual name begins to give to us. That is Kleshangani. That is Subhada. When we start experiencing this indifference to duality. Okay, so I'll pause over here. The next set of verses are the concluding in the chapter that talk about Jat Bharat's interaction with Goddess Kali. I'll stop here and see if there is any discussion.
Just a comment, Prabhu. Gorkshur Babaji also acted a bit like this.
Yeah, you're right. Gorkishore, and in Vaishnava Acharyas, you see there are other Acharyas also. There was Vamsi Babaji, he was a contemporary of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He would also appear to be, so he was very he would scold and drive away everybody. He didn't appear to be like mad, but he was very stern. And he would drive away everybody just to make sure that he was undisturbed. So yes, we see that when devotees are advanced, then just to be uninterrupted in their internal meditation, they create this wall of protection around themselves.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. The tendency to be equanimous or not affected by the dualities, is it something spontaneously? Does it something spontaneously happen with the advancement of spiritual spiritual advancement, or is it something needs to be endeavored also consciously? How does it
It's a byproduct of bhakti, right? In Nectar of Devotion, it's indicated that Kleshangani and Subhada are fully manifested at the stage of Anartha Nivritti. which means that at that point, so what is Kleshangni and Subhada? It does not mean the kleshas disappear. What it means is the kleshas don't burn you anymore. The kleshas don't affect you anymore. And it's not that everything along you is auspicious. It means that everything around you is seen in connection with Krishna, and then it becomes auspicious. So externally, there will not be a lot of change. The change externally is essentially internal change. It's a byproduct of bhakti. We don't have to seek it. Right? Now, if you remember, in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the first instruction that Krishna gives to Arjuna, Stam Tishashva Bharata. Right? Do not be disturbed. Mata Sparshas Lukanteya. Now, at that point, he hasn't spoken about bhakti. So that indifference, if one is on the non-spiritual platform, yes, then one cultivates it. One cultivates it by different processes. One cultivates it by jnana, by following the injunctions and prohibitions of karma, like charity, right? Charity almost, it develops equanimity in you. And I worked hard to earn $10, I'm giving $5 in charity, but this is my $5. I could enjoy the $5. Right? But then you're giving it away because the scriptures instruct. So then over time, then that sense of I did it, it's mine to enjoy, that gets pacified, right? So karma helps you, jnana helps you, I'm not the body, I'm the soul. So it's coming from the body, through the body, let it go away. That is cultivated. The beauty of bhakti is that, like when we chant the holy name, we don't really meditate. There are not many, like as practicing devotees, we really get instructions of cultivating indifference. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita, one of the qualities that Krishna appreciates the most is that of indifference, equanimity. Throughout, it's the theme that he builds right through the 18th chapter. But we don't get that instruction. Not because it's not important, but because it comes by itself. That you chant, you follow the angas of bhakti, and the indifference is a byproduct of the attraction to Krishna. So it comes on its own. And we experience this. We experience this in our lives. We may not experience it on a day-to-day basis, but we experience it in retrospect.
Just one follow-up on that, Prabhu. Having been doing practicing somewhat of bhakti in my life, I noticed that sometimes get upset about something that whatever that I'm expecting doesn't happen, which is like a personal sense enjoyment program I'm talking about, nothing to do with Krishna's service. For example, I'm expecting some food at home, and then when I go, the plan changes, and then it kind of upsets. So at that time, I have to practice this tolerance of what comes should be accepted, rather than trying to becoming too upset and get out of that mode of going into the passion and ignorance, rather than staying in the mode of goodness. So that's what I was thinking, that maybe at the stage that I am in, I'm not in the full devotional service yet. So this kind of equanimity or accepting what comes on its own is still not there. So I have to endeavor for that. So is that something that you do you think that is the right approach? I mean, I don't see any other option though, but I'm just asking to get some.
So it's very interesting that maybe about a few weeks ago, we were having a discussion on exactly this topic, and I can share with you the crux of the discussion. So when a devotee goes through life, then yes, the devotee does experience unfavorable events in life. Sometimes those unfavorable events are from other devotees. Sometimes the unfavorable events are from non-devotees, right? So when the unfavorable events are from the devotees, then it's like it's like in a family. If your father beats you up, well, in the USA you may get arrested, but in India they always do. So if your father beats you up, there's a little bit of angst, but at the end of the day, it's father, it's my father. Everything is forgiven. If the man down the street beats you up, now it's a whole different thing. How dare he beat me up? Now it's war. It's a different equation. So when adversities come through the hands of the devotees, they are Krishna's loving hand that is burning away your karma. So I had given 2 lectures. One was seeing Krishna's hand in your life, and the second was seeing Krishna's fist in your life. So sometimes you see Krishna's hand, and sometimes you see Krishna's fist. How does Krishna's fist appear in your life? Through devotees. Right? Krishna will rarely come down and beat you up himself, but he will make arrangements through other devotees. But why? Because he wants to burn away your karma and he wants to give you some teachings out of there. It's a win-win situation. So that is why the recommendation is that the devotees surround themselves with devotees, so that all the adversities that come to them is from devotees, which essentially is the loving hand of Krishna. So we go home and the food is not there, the wife is busy somewhere else. Krishna's hand. Krishna is trying to teach us something. Better for me to face this angst from my wife as opposed to from my boss. So there was some angst that was going to come into my life. It's a million times better for me to face it from a devotee than from a non-devotee. It is much more glorious for me to be humble before another devotee than to be forced to be humble to a non-devotee. Right? So I'm trying to condense a long discussion, but maybe because of the force of circumstances, there is a need for us to be humble. Circumstantially, we need to be humiliated. Whatever the karmic reaction is, that's what is coming due to us. Better that it be done by a devotee than by a non-devotee. Better for us to practice humility with a devotee than be forced to practice humility with a non-devotee. Because they're Krishna's hand. So your original question was that, do we need to practice indifference or practice equanimity in adversity as opposed to it coming on its own? So short answer is yes and but. So yes, we need to practice humility, or we need to practice that equanimity, but as a glorious reciprocation to Krishna. Otherwise, we might become stoic or indifferent. We don't want to go down that route. Like when a devotee chastises us, then like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nityananda, so Shivananda is saying, he would go to all this length to arrange for the trip from to Jagannath Puri, from Mahaprabhu's Nadia, right? From Nadia to Jagannath Puri. And it was like crossing several kingdoms. And once he was late in giving Nityananda Prabhu prasadam, Nityananda Prabhu came and kicked him in the stomach and cursed him that all your generations will die. And Shivananda Sen is very happy with that, right? Not that he's happy that he made Nityananda Prabhu upset, but he's happy that he is getting Krishna's love. And of course, Nityananda Prabhu is Krishna, but he's happy that he's getting Krishna's love. So if you're able to cultivate that, then indifference is again a byproduct of that. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm sorry I spoke a little bit more, but this was a topic we've been discussing for some time now. So I think you pushed a button. Sorry about that.
Thank you. For my advantage, it's wonderful. Thank you. Hope others also feel okay with that.
Actually, it's very good to know, because you have condensed it very nicely, and it's something that we have to practice, try to educate ourselves every time.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Okay, moving on to verse 12. Please go ahead, Prabhu.
At this time, being desirous of obtaining a son, a leader of Dakoi, who came from a Sudra family, wanted to worship goddess Bhadrakali by offering her in sacrifice a dull man, who is considered no better than an animal.
So as we know that Durga Devi, she has various forms. And there is a form of goddess Parvati, who is consort of Lord Shiva, and other forms. So one of her form is Bhadrakali, which is one of her ghastly form, in which she is surrounded by ghosts and demons. She is drinking blood. So those who are in the mode of ignorance, who are taken to sacrifices of humans or animals, they worship Bhadrakali. And one of the requirements of this time is, so this particular leader of the dacoit, he wanted a son, so he wanted to make an offering to her. So he wanted to offer, and this is as per the rules and regulations of offering, that one should sacrifice a dull man. That is basically a person who is mentally retarded or mentally not there. So that was his plan, that he was looking for some man animal to sacrifice to Bhadrakali with the desire of getting a son. Okay, next verse.
The leader of the dacoit captured a man animal for sacrifice, but he escaped, and the leader ordered his follower to find him. They ran in different directions, but could not find him. Wandering here and there in the middle of the night, covered by dense darkness, they came to a paddy field where they saw the exalted son of Angira family, Jadabharat, who was sitting in an elevated place, guarding the field against the attack of deer and wild pigs.
Next verse, please.
The followers and the servant of the dacoit chief considered Jadbharat to possess quality quite suitable for a man animal, and they decided that he was the perfect choice for sacrifice. Their faces bright with happiness, they bound him with rope and brought him to the temple of Goddess Kali.
So Prabhupada writes wonderful purport on that. He gives some kind of context that he says, in some parts of India, animalistic men are still sacrificed before goddess Kali. However, such sacrifices are only performed by Shudras and dacoits. And the reason they offer the sacrifices is to get some kind of success. In this particular case, he wanted a son, but any kind of success, whether better stealing, better victory over opposition. And they select a dumb, retarded person for the sacrifice. So when the main person they had caught escaped, they were running around trying to find, and they saw Jadbharat, who also appeared to satisfy this criteria. Right? He had a strong body, and he was dumb, or he was pretending to be dumb. Later on, we'll see that he actually speaks very eloquently, but he was pretending to be dumb. And when he was captured, there was no there was no protest from his side. So Jat Bharat could have protected himself in one of several ways. Like it was noted that he had a strong body, so he could have beaten them up, right? It was noted also that, or it will be seen later on, that he's a very eloquent speaker. So he could have spoken his way out of it. Also, the criteria was that the person is like an animal, Pashu, Purush. And by speaking intelligently, by counseling them, he could have shown that, no, I don't satisfy that criteria, but he does not do. And the reason is that he has complete dependence on the Lord. When he sees there is a need to do service to the Lord, then he activates all this. His intelligence, his speech, he activates all that. But when there is a need for protecting himself, he does not find it very, he does not use that opportunity to come out of his shell. So Prabhupada says that he's simply dependent on Krishna. Marebi rakhabi yo ichhatohar nityadyas prati tuya adhikar. That my Lord, I am now surrendered unto you. I am your eternal servant. If you like me, you can kill me, or if you like, you can protect me. In any case, I'm fully surrendered to you. This is the mentality of very, very advanced devotee. Like the 8th verse in Shastakam, where Mahaprabhu prays that whether you make me broken-hearted by not coming before me, or whether you embrace me, either way, you are my Lord, life after life. Okay, verse 15.
After this, all the thieves, according to their imaginative ritual for killing animalistic men, bathed Jat Bharat, dressed him in new clothes, decorated him with ornaments benefiting an animal, smeared his body with scented oil, and decorated him with tilaka, sandalwood pearl, and garland. They fed him sumptuously and then brought him before the goddess Kali, offering her incense, lamp, garland, parched grain, and newly grown twig, sprout, fruits, and flower. In this way, they worship the deity before killing the man animal, and they vibrated song and prayers and played drum and bugle. Jat Bharat was then made to sit down before the deity.
So one of the words that Srila Prabhupada comments on is Swavidhina. So Vidhi, of course, means rules and regulations, like we do Vaidhi Bhakti, which means according to Vidhi. Swavidhina means you make up your own rules and regulations. It's just the result of your own mental speculation. So Prabhupada makes the point that Vidhis become bona fide when they are given by the scriptures. So the potency in following Vidhi is acting according to the Vedic injunctions. One may lead a very, very regulated life. But if those regulations are not given by the scriptures, then they have no benefit, or they have opposite effect. And case in point is, since we were discussing previous chapters about Rishabdev, the followers of Rishabdev, they have lots of rules and regulations, much, much more than Vaishnavas have. What time to eat, what time to not to eat, what not to eat, how to dress. Very, very strong vidhis, but they're swavidhina, right? Not as per scriptures. So just following regulations is of no use. They have to be again by the scriptures. Now Prabhupada also makes the point that animal sacrifice is there in the Vedas. And he says that the Tamasic Shastras give instructions for sacrifice of an animal like a goat or a buffalo before goddess Kali, but there is no mention of killing a man, however dull he may be. This process was manufactured by the dacoits themselves, and therefore the word swavidhina is used. Now, when Prabhupada makes this point of animal sacrifice in the Vedas, he always expands on it and says that one should not misuse that, right? So he says that there is some concessions given in the Tamasic Shastras of animal sacrifice to the demigods. One never sacrifices animals to Lord Vishnu, but there is some concession given to animal sacrifice to different demigods. But there is a reason behind it. And the reason Prabhupada says is that the conditioned soul has a natural tendency towards sex and meat eating. Consequently, the Shastras grant them some concessions. Actually, the Shastras aim at putting end of these abominable activities, but they impart some regulative principles so that gradually the meat eaters and sex hunters will be rectified. And so this is important because sometimes when you're talking, especially in India, when you're talking to people about vegetarianism, then somebody will come and say that, well, the scriptures also talk about animal sacrifices. So firstly, these are Tamasic scriptures. And secondly, there is a reason behind it. And the reason is that the person's natural propensity is degraded. But the Vedas are so kind, Krishna is so kind, that he does not even leave them alone. And he says, look, I have something for you. That this is how, if you want to eat meat, this is how you eat meat. Like in the Vedas, is described that when the animal is sacrificed, along with the sacrifice of the animals, there has to be a yajna performed, Brahmana has to be there. Then the person who sacrificed, who's the proprietor of the yajna, who's sanctioning the yajna, he comes and he chants into the ear. Let's say a goat is being sacrificed, he chants into the ear of the goat certain mantras, which basically say that just like I'm doing to you, I understand that you will also do to me. So by establishing all these rules and regulations, first casual meat eating is eliminated. Then when the person is made to say these kinds of things, like the word in Sanskrit, the word for meat is mamsha. It's mass, but it's a convoluted form of mamsha. So ma means no and amsha means part. So mamsha means that I don't want to be a part of this. So even the word has that prohibition in it. That mamsha, don't make this a part of you. Don't make this meat a part of you. Mamsha also means mamamsha. That just like I'm making you a part of me, I will be a part of you. So just like I'm eating you, you will eat me. And then most importantly, there is some kind of adherence to scriptures that comes up. Maybe in the mode of ignorance, but at least there is an adherence to scriptures. And then from there, one may elevate from mode of ignorance to passion and goodness. And this is something that we see in all religions. Like we see that in Judaism, there is a concept of kosher, similar in case of Islam, it's called halal. And the injunction there is that when an animal is killed, so this is for halal, this is for Islam, then there should be a Maulvi, a priest, that is chanting mantras or prayers. And the process of halal essentially is to follow the instruction that the meat should not be contaminated with two things. It should not be contaminated with blood, and it should not be contaminated with milk. If any of these two things come in the meat, then from halal it becomes haram. So basically from halal being allowed and haram means disallowed. Now, in a true sense, what it means is meat can never be free of blood. But what people do now is that they drain the blood from the animal, they slice its jugular and they put it upside down. So they drain whatever blood they can drain out of it. But you can never take the blood out of meat. And when saying that it cannot be contaminated with milk, it's prohibiting cow eating, because that's what the cow does. That cow produces milk. Even the male cow, it grows on milk. It has a sustenance on milk. But even though there is all this convolution, there is still this adherence to something, to a superior authority, the sense of surrender. That I would like to eat at work. One of my very close colleagues, he was a very strictly following Jewish person, very, very strict follower. He would come with that thing on his head, and every day morning, just like we go for Mangal Aarti, he would go to the synagogue and spend an hour there. And essentially, his eating habits and my eating habits were very similar. That he would rarely eat out, even vegetarian food, because he would say that the utensils may be mixed. And because of that, even in restaurants that were serving vegetarian food, unless they were fully vegetarian restaurant, he would not eat out. And most of the time in cafeteria, he would just eat the salad without any dressing, which is what I would also eat, salad without dressings. The only difference is once he took me to a Jewish restaurant, and there he was eating everything. He was eating, because there it was kosher. So he was eating chicken and this and that. That was the only difference. But at least he had that sense control. So he was head and shoulders above the other people who were indiscriminately eating whatever was there. So that's the purpose of the scriptures, even the Tamasic scriptures, that they force the person to control the senses and also instill faith, which can then be elevated. Okay, verse 16.
At this time, one of the thieves, acting as the chief priest, was ready to offer the blood of Bharat, whom they imagined to be an animal man, to the goddess Kali to drink as a liquor. He therefore took up a very fearsome sword, which was very sharp, and consecrating it by the mantra of Bhadrakali, raised it to kill Bharat.
So Sukhdev Goswami notes, he said at that time, one of the thieves acting as the priest. So the person was not a qualified priest, he was a qualified thief. And that was his main qualification. But Swavidhina, that no qualifications, no training, no understanding, made up his own rules and regulations, that I will offer blood, and Bhadrakali will accept it and drink it as liquor. And some mantras he chanted to consecrate the sword. And idea was that the chief of the thieves would then get a son, right? So Sukhdev Goswami paints this picture of complete neglect of the Vedas, the scriptures, lack of qualified person, not much different from what the situation currently is. But here it's showcased in this few people surrounding Bharat. Okay, next verse.
All the rogues and the thief who had made arrangement for the worship of goddess Kali were low-minded and bound to the mode of passion and ignorance. They were overpowered by the desire to become very rich. Therefore, they had the audacity to disobey the injunction of the Vedas so much so that they were prepared to kill Jet Bharat, a self-realized soul born in a Brahmana family. Due to their envy, these dacoits brought him before the goddess Kali for sacrifice. Such people are always addicted to envious activities, and therefore they dare to try to kill Jet Bharat. Jet Bharat was a best friend of all living entity. He was no one and me, and he was always absorbed in meditation of the Supreme Godhead. He was born of a good Brahmana father, and killing him was forbidden, even though he might have been an enemy or aggressive person. In any case, there was no reason to kill Jet Bharat, and the goddess Kali could not bear this. She could immediately understand that these sinful dacoits were about to kill a great devotee of the Lord. Suddenly, the deity body burst a thunder, and the goddess Kali personally emerged from it in a body burning with an intense and intolerable effulgence.
So the purport Prabhupada writes that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that it was due to the Brahman effulgence of such a devotee as Jet Bharat, the deity was fractured. And so the wording of the verse indicates that the goddess Kali emerged from it in a body burning with an intense and intolerable effulgence. And Chakravarti part in the mood of a devotee says that effulgence was actually the reflection of the effulgence of Jet Bharat. That fractured the deity. And in that glow, goddess Kali emerged. So the verse is a nice verse because it puts together side by side the qualities of three personalities. And in Bhagavad Subodhini, there's a table that I put in the document Prabhu shared. It puts together the qualities of the devotees with the qualities of Jet Bharat and the qualities of goddess Kali, right? So let's look at the qualities of the dacoits. And so this is just in terms of this verse. There were other qualities that were enunciated in earlier verses, and they're mostly repetitions. So they're described as low-minded and envious. Envious, why? Because the nature of envy is that it is absolute. Right? The nature of jealousy is that it's relative. One is only jealous of one who is at the same or a higher position. One is not jealous of one who is at a lower position. The nature of envy is that whether the person is same position, higher or lower position, you still resent that position. So Jet Bharat appeared to them as a man animal, much lower than them, but they still want to kill him. That's the nature of envy. And why low-minded? Because they're bound by the lower modes. If they want a son for the chief, or if they want prosperity, there are different karmakandi processes that are given. They occurs in the mode of goodness. But they were choosing to do this ghastly process because they were tamasic. Right? And the third quality that is described is that they were overpowered by the desire to become rich. Earlier on, it is said that the chief desired a son. So you can understand both material qualities, whether he wanted progeny or the dacoits wanted wealth, but they were blinded by it. They were blinded by this desire. So Sukadeva Goswami says that they were overpowered by the desire. So between Jet Bharat and them, Jet Bharat had overpowered all his desires. And the dacoits, they were overpowered by their desires. And that's the difference in the standing of the two. Fourth point is made that they were audacious enough to disobey the Vedic injunctions. And Sukadeva Goswami, of course, he's talking about a different time, but he's shocked then how can somebody disobey the Vedic injunctions? So audacity is basically acting in a way that surprises and shocks everyone. If somebody makes an audacious statement, like I am God, or makes an audacious statement that from tomorrow I will solve the energy crisis in the world. So that's the audacity they were displaying, that they were willfully disobeying the Vedic injunctions. And then what was the fifth thing? That they were ready to kill Jat Bharat, a Brahmana. Right. So Sukdev Goswami says that, or reading between the lines, he said that it's a cruel and unauthorized act, even in an emergency. So in the Vedas, there is the regular nitya karma that one can does on a regular basis, and then there is something that is karma that is done in an emergency basis, like Vishwamitra eating the flesh for dog, or there are cases in which the Brahmanas will lie in order to save the life of another person. So there are activities that that may appear to be cruel and unauthorized, but they are justified by the nature of the emergency that are there. So Sukdev Goswami says that there may be many activities that can be authorized in an emergency, but not the killing of a Brahmana, and definitely not the killing of a self-realized soul. So the dacoits may make this point that we have an emergency situation. What? That we need our chief to have a son. We have an emergency situation that we want to become rich. And for the sake of argument, if one accepts that, then Sukdev Goswami says that even in an emergency situation, killing a self-realized soul and a Brahman is a cruel and unauthorized act, even in an emergency. Now, he also describes the qualities of Jat Bharat, that best friend to all. So they are being inimical to Jat Bharat. Jat Bharat has no enmity. So Sukdev Goswami describes it both ways. He says, Jat Bharat is no one's enemy and the friend to everyone. Right? So even the persons who are trying to kill him, Jat Bharat is not inimical to them. Now later on we'll see that he appears to be inimical to Maharaj Rahugana when he starts chastising him. But we actually see that enmity is actually Jat Bharat being the bestest friend for him. Maharaj Rahugana actually became liberated because of the instructions of Jat Bharat. So unlike the dacoits who are envious of everyone, Jat Bharat is best friend of all and no one's enemy. Third quality is that he is born of a qualified Brahman father. Fourth, always absorbed in the meditation of the Lord. And then finally, Sukdev Goswami says that even if he was an enemy, even if he was the aggressor, he should not be killed. They're very similar to the statement Arjuna makes in Bhagavad Gita, when in the first chapter, when he says that I see Drona and Bhishma, my teacher and grandfather, and even though they are standing before me as an aggressor, by the injunction of the scriptures, they should not be harmed. Similar thing has been said by Sukdev Goswami, that after establishing the position of Jat Bharat, that he is absorbed in the meditation of the Lord, he is a qualified Brahman, such a person, even if he was an enemy or an aggressor, killing him was forbidden. And then finally, the two qualities of Goddess Kali. Goddess Kali understood that the sinful dacoits were about to kill a great devotee. And Second, not really quality, action that she burst out of her deity in the form burning with intense and intolerable effulgence. Right. So point will be made later on that more than her so-called followers, she was favorable to the follower of Lord Vishnu. Prabhupada would give this example often to indicate the superiority of worshipping the Lord as opposed to demigods. Now, these dacoits, of course, they were not even authorized worshippers of goddess Kali, but still, to some extent, it makes the point that even if they, in their convoluted view was trying to worship goddess Kali, they got no protection from her. In fact, she killed them all and she drank their blood. Why? To protect one who's not even worshipping her. Right? But the qualification of Jat Bharat was that he was absorbed in the meditation of the Lord. Okay, verse 18.
Intolerant of the offences committed, the infuriated goddess Kali flashes her eyes and displays her fierce curved teeth. Her reddish eyes glow, and she displayed her fearsome features. She assumed a frightening body, as if she were prepared to destroy the entire creation. Leaping violently from the altar, she immediately decapitated all the rocks and the thieves with the very sword with which they were intended to kill Jat Bharat. She then began to drink the hot blood that flowed from the neck of the beheaded rogue and thief, and as if this blood were liquor. Indeed, she drank the intoxicant with her associate, who were witches, female demons. Becoming intoxicated with this blood, they all began to sing very loudly and dance as though prepared to annihilate the entire universe. At the same time, they began to play with the head of the rogue and thief, tossing them above as if they were balls.
So Sukdev Goswami, he there's a phrase that painting a picture with the words. So he's painting a very graphic picture with the words. You can almost imagine the scene. He has so eloquently described it. That the deity form bursts, goddess Kali burning with effulgence appears. She's surrounded by so many witches and female demons. They quickly decapitate the rogues and the thieves. They use the same sword that they were using to kill Jat Bharat. And not satisfied with just killing them, they drank their blood. The witches and the demons and Bhadrakali, being intoxicated with blood, then they began to sing loudly and dance, looking to annihilate the universe. They began to play with the heads of the rogues. So pretty ghastly picture. And in all this, Jat Bharat is sitting with complete fearlessness and equanimity. And Prabhupada says that neglecting Krishna consciousness, foolish people try to satisfy the goddess by offering her many abominable things. But ultimately, when there is a little discrepancy in this worship, the goddess punishes the worshipper by taking his life. Demonic people worship goddess Kali to obtain some material benefit, but they are not excused of the sins performed in the name of worship. To sacrifice a man or animal before the deity is specifically forbidden. Right? So earlier on, Prabhupada says that animal sacrifices allowed, but not the sacrifice of a human. Here he says to sacrifice a man or animal before the deity, and this is specifically true for the current day and age. That things that are forbidden in the age of Kali is to sacrifice a cow or a horse, or to perform any kind of animal sacrifice. Okay, next verse.
When an envious person commits an offense before a great personality, he is always punished in the way mentioned above.
Okay, next verse.
Sukadev Swami then said to Maharaj Pariksit, "Oh, Vishnu Dhata, those who already know that the soul is separate from the body, who are liberated from the invincible knot in the heart, who are always engaged in the welfare activities for all living entities, and who never contemplate harming anyone, are always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who carries is this, the Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as a supreme time to kill the demon and protect his devotee. The devotees always take shelter at the feet of the Lord. Therefore, at all times, even if threatened by decapitation, they remain unagitated. For them, this is not at all wonderful."
So, three characteristics of the pure devotees of the Lord, or four characteristics are described. One is that Vibhukta Dehadi Atma Bhava Sudridra Hridaya Granthinam, that he has severed the tight knot of body identification. Second is Sarva Sattva Suhurd Atmana, that he is a friend to all and acts for the welfare of everyone. The third is Nirvairana, he never contemplates harming anyone. And the fourth is really a consequence, that such a person is always protected by the attentive Lord and his chakra. So, not identifying with the body, being a friend to everybody, and never harming anybody. So these are the manifest characteristic of a devotee. The root, of course, is their devotion to the Lord. Prabhupada says that these are some of the great qualities of a pure devotee of the Lord. Now remember, these qualities don't make one a devotee of the Lord. But being a devotee, one acquires this quality. That a devotee is firmly convinced of his spiritual identity, which is why the tight knot of the bodily identification is broken. And because he is seeing everybody in relationship to Krishna, he automatically becomes friendly to everyone and never contemplates harming anyone. And because of his special protection position with respect to Krishna, Prabhupada says because of his full dependence on Krishna, Krishna reciprocates by fully protecting such a person. Right? So the point is that these qualities manifest, the root of this quality is Krishna consciousness, is devotion to Krishna. Prabhupada said devotees are always fully dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Lord is always eager to give them all protection in all circumstances. Once I was listening to a lecture and by Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj actually, and he was making this point that when one prays to the demigods, then they reciprocate with a lot of reluctance. He says, when somebody starts praying to the demigod says that, my God, one more person has come. I have to take care of him also. What a hassle. I mean, he speaks and he makes this point in Hindi, which is a lot more humorous. But he's saying that they're not very enthused. But when one begins to take shelter of Krishna, Krishna is enthusiastic in the protection. Like in Braj Leela, we see that Krishna does not have to be pushed forward. He rushes forward to protect the devotees. So with this, we end the chapter. Quick recap of the chapter. The chapter begins with the birth of Jat Bharat and how he grows up and pretends to be mad to avoid bad association. Then we saw the father's attachment to Jat Bharat and Jat Bharat's reciprocation by being indifferent. Then we saw, after the passing away of the father, how Jat Bharat is mistreated by his brothers, but Jat Bharat continues to stay calm. And then the final 9 verses are Jat Bharat being kidnapped by these thieves, the description of the thieves that Swavidhina, by their own mentality, tamogunis, mode of ignorance, trying to propitiate Bhadrakali, and they offer Jadbhara, tried to offer him as a sacrifice. And she manifests along with her associates, kills them with the very sword they were trying to kill Jadbhara, drink their blood. And the chapter ends with the glorious qualities of the devotees of the Lord and the Lord's reciprocation for eagerly protecting them. Okay, so we are a little over time. If anybody has any points of discussion, we can spend a few minutes.
Just want to talk about the Swa Vidina. Now we also have a lot of this, the new coming of different people like Sai Baba and Sadhguru and XYZ, so many of them. They concocted their own philosophy.
There is a marketplace of Swavidina nowadays. It comes in all different packings there. So that time there were only these thieves, but now it's more the norm than the exception. I remember I was attending a marriage in India, and it was marriage season, so the priests are very busy at that time. They're like double, triple booked. So this priest came quickly, recited some mantras, and he said, okay, done. Now, the people who were getting married, they didn't really know anything, but they said, this is very short time. How come you married us so quickly? And he said, okay, sit down. And then he recites some more mantra. Now he says, you're really married. And then he goes away after that. So he was reciting some mantra which nobody understood. And the people who were getting married, they didn't understand. So everybody was working on their own conception. It was almost comical, right? He said, okay, you want more mantras? He chanted some more mantras, and nobody really knew what the mantras meant. So we have all flavors of Swavidina going on. Like you were mentioning, who were you mentioning just now? No, somebody who
Sadhguru.
Sadhguru, right? So he actually very proudly he says that he has never read the Bhagavad Gita. He never plans to read it. He says, if I read it, then my pure consciousness might get influenced. So I want to speak from my own pure consciousness. And he basically tells others also, don't read all these books. Go with your consciousness. Follow your inner guiding light.
Inner engineering.
Yeah, and then one question to be asked is that if I'm going to follow my inner light, why am I sitting and listening to your inner light? He's trying to have other people follow his inner light, saying that you follow your own inner light. So there are all versions of Swavidina that's going on that even Sukdev Goswami probably could not have imagined.
Thank you.
Okay, so next week we'll start with the 10th chapter. Yeah, that one's a little discussion. Okay. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantpur Vaishnavind ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.